So Russell now is going to talk about a research project that's going on and how everyone can sort of input into that and give their ideas. So I'll hand over to Russell.
Hi. Most of you, I hope, will be aware that we have something called a priority setting partnership ongoing at the moment. And in fact, it was actually supposed to finish just over a week ago, but we've had a special agreement that they'll hold open the survey until the end of this weekend for anyone who attends this conference to complete the survey, either with some help from someone here or in their own room or when they get back tomorrow. But for some of you, or for quite a lot of you, I'm guessing, some of the slides and some of the conversation that Marcella has just delivered, you may be scratching your head and thinking, well, this is too scientific. This is more than I can absorb, really. And especially when we start talking about other conditions as well as LHON. And what does something that causes a muscular problem have to do with me and my eyesight? Well, the connecting factor for all of them is that they all fall under this category of mitochondrial disease. The reason I wanted to put you through the pain of hearing a little bit about this type of condition is that we actually have a unique opportunity at the moment that is finishing quite soon. And for me, this is hugely important and something I've been battling for a while. And I'll tell you why. I visited a biotech company about 4 or 5 years ago in the US, and they were very proudly telling me about the compound that they were developing and how revolutionary it was going to be for patients with LHON. And they explained to me that this isn't for people who are newly diagnosed. This is for people who have had the condition for a year or two and where it's stabilized. And if they take this compound, which would be very expensive, I'm sure, then it will stabilize it and make sure it doesn't get any worse. And I scratched my head and I said, but that's what most people experience anyway, for the most part. How on earth do you think you're going to make millions of pounds selling this to health authorities when it just does what seems to be the natural history? And the faces around the room all looked a little bit puzzled and shocked, and they didn't seem to have asked that question before. And for me, that was one of the things that's really driven me in the last several years, that it's occurred to me that too often researchers don't ask patients enough questions before they go running off and doing their research. Present company accepted, absolutely. Marcella is very close to patients. Marcella actually sees patients in clinic on a regular basis, but you'd be astonished, a lot of researchers in medicine actually have never met a patient with the condition that they're researching, and that even goes for LHON. And there is a huge risk under those circumstances that they go running off, spending lots and lots of time and resources researching for something that we're not interested in. It's very interesting from an academic viewpoint, very good for them, and they can build their career and write papers on it, and other academics will read it and think it's wonderful. But if it doesn't get a single step closer to providing treatments to us, why should we care? And we don't. So this priority setting partnership is, I think, a unique opportunity because what it's doing is it's being got together through the Wellcome Foundation funding, through something called the James Lind Alliance, which is an NHS sponsored organisation set up precisely to try and establish this kind of project, through the Genetic Alliance, which is an umbrella group which the LHON Society subscribes to, that covers all genetic conditions in the UK, which are all pretty much rare diseases. And the idea is that we have a survey, or actually a series of surveys. This is the first one that maps things out for us. And we have these surveys where patients and family members, carers, other people closely and directly affected by the conditions get an opportunity to say to the researchers, what about doing this? Or, I think this is important. At the end of this project, which is going to last another year or so, and it depends partly on how much feedback we get. We will come up, or the aim is to come up with a list of 10 priorities that we hand over to researchers worldwide, not just in the UK. It's a UK project. Only UK people are involved in feeding in, but it absolutely will be shared with everybody afterwards, because research doesn't know boundaries. LHON doesn't know boundaries. So I think it was really important that you had a little bit of the context for this survey from Marcella. We've done pretty well. I think we've got more than 500 survey responses so far, but we want more. We want them to be as well informed as possible. And ideally, I'd like all of you who won't have filled this survey yet to try and complete it this weekend. We'll have some people around with laptops if you want some help to do it here. There are some leaflets on the tables, or we can provide the links to the website that gives a little more information and also leads straight into the survey. It's not difficult. It takes about 10, maximum 15 minutes. And I absolutely have to say, you don't have to be a scientist or to use scientific language when posing your questions. They can be as simple and as basic as you like. The key to this is that researchers are clever people, but they don't know all of the answers. And out of this project, my dream, if you like, is that we actually might find some little nuggets of gold that no one's really been thinking about, and that we connect those together, and it actually gives us some new impetus and new ideas for research projects that will lead to things that patients really want and need. So with that, I'm happy to answer questions throughout the day. Marcella's going to be with us for some hours yet, I hope. And Marcella, if you'd like to answer any immediate questions that come to mind, but I do appreciate it might be something you might want to think, I'd like to let this sink in a little bit before coming along and asking questions. Is it the end of the world if you don't complete the survey? No, of course not. We have a lot of answers, but you might actually have a question that nobody's thought of. You know, it happens all the time, and we need input. And I think it was really worth us having this presentation to give. Yeah, it's complicated. And by the way, I've been going to these conferences and even more scientific ones for several years now, and I still struggle to follow. Those people who couldn't see the slides, I didn't understand all of them, even though I can see them perfectly and should know much more about it. It is complicated, I do know that. And I'll try and stop now. Thanks.
Can I ask you, Russell, do you get a feeling, because obviously I'm aware of the numbers of people who've done the survey, do you know how many people with LHON nationally have done the survey? Do you
I have no idea.
No idea, we don't know that yet. That's a shame, isn't it? Because what we didn't want was for people with LHON to be underrepresented in the whole mitochondrial disease community.
It's actually, LHON, I think I'm right, is the biggest mitochondrial disease by numbers.
But on the other hand, my experience has been when you talk to groups that support mitochondrial disease, what does often come through is the people who are looking after children, so the pediatric onset, the very, very early onset mitochondrial disease with complex needs and life-terminating conditions. Because of course they are, so tragic, so they're often seen and heard. Then you often hear of people with mitochondrial diseases that are very much more perhaps widespread, so they're in wheelchairs and people who have huge complex needs. What I tend to see is that it may be that the LHON community, because it affects predominantly one organ site, even though we know how important that is, I don't know that we are seen and heard enough in that mitochondrial community. So that's why I think Russell's point is really important. It would be really good for people to be seen and heard in this community, if you like. Because mitochondrial disease, as I've tried to mention, is actually an awful lot more than just Labour's, but Labour's is a massive part of it.
Yeah.